Hey, it's Will. I'm back again. It's not too late tonight. It's only about it's only about midnight, but I kind of felt like I needed to clarify some thoughts. I'm just going to cover two tonight that I think I might have given the wrong impression um, on some of my videos. I guess that might also be part of the danger of doing late night videos, right? And also, I want to explain where my head was at with some of it because without knowing where someone's head is at, you might improperly translate what's being said, right? And a lot of these videos, I've got a ton of ideas bouncing around, and so I felt I needed to make a couple clarifications. And one of them would be about is God a species or a race of beings, right? Um, I think that would, it's not a, on surface level looking at that, I think that can give the wrong impression. So let me kind of go over my thoughts on it. When um, when we go back to the beginning of the Bible, we see a plurality that exists with God. You know, like let us do creation, basically, right? And you see the oneness of God in being using the word echad, which is the same thing used for a marriage couple. You have um, the nature of Jesus, the essence of Jesus being described as God in the New Testament, right? And I guess when I want to make a comment like I viewing God as a species, that can sound a little exacting. So biblically, we would see that at a minimum, there's more than one person or personality that makes up who and what God is. Yet they are complete in unification, right? They are one. But you also have multiple, more than one, at least a plurality of personalities or persons in that. When I say a race or a species, I'm going to be looking at that in a very broad sense, coming from a human and English perspective, not coming from a scientific perspective. Because if you take the strict scientific definition of a race or a species, I don't think you could fit God in that box, right? So I'm using it in a very broad sense, not the strict scientific sense of those words. Um, so biblically, God would exist outside of time and space. And scientifically, knowing that time and space are relative only plays into that. If He made everything, then that would include time and space. And that's something that is going to be hard to understand from a human perspective right away because our lives, our existence in this state of being is very finite. So how do you try to understand or explain the timeless and the infinite? Uh, I don't ascribe to the strict sense of it's a mystery, right? I think that there are going to be aspects of God that we aren't going to be able to fully grasp because of being human, right? At the same time, I don't think we should just say and not try to think about it and try to understand at least a little bit and uh, to look at it. Because just to say to take it on blind faith and just it's a mystery, don't worry about it, that doesn't work for me. Again, that's just me. That's my personality. Um, I it's going to be something that I ponder, right? So operating from a human perspective, from a finite perspective, trying to grasp and understand and express the infinite is going to be difficult, and I'm never going to fully get it, right? But there are ways of me translating that um, in my own headspace and where I'm at to try to get a little bit of perspective on it, right? Kind of like, is God an alien? Are angels aliens? Well, when you look at the actual definition of alien, then yeah, by definition, God would be an alien. The angels would be aliens, right? So from an English human perspective, that definition would fit. Obviously, it doesn't capture it fully. So when we look at something like a species or a race, from a finite perspective, in an attempt to get an inkling or a glimpse of the infinite or timeless, that's kind of the where I'm coming from. I'm not saying that there's God as a species or a race in a strict sense. It's just my brain trying to wrap itself around something that is beyond my ability to fully comprehend. And using that loose definition of a race or a species, falls miserably short of trying to explain the infinite. Like, so I just kind of I wanted to clear that up. That it's not that I'm saying it's a full understanding or a comprehension of anything. It's just in my brain a way to look at, to try to get a little bit of a grasp from a human and English perspective of how to describe a concept of a being, an entity that exists outside of time and space that made everything, right? Good luck explaining that from our perspective. It's just my brain kind of working through a very, very finite, let's make that smaller, very finite way of understanding it in just the tiniest bit. Again, not meant to be doctrine, not meant to be taken on just scientific definitions, but more in a very broad sense. The other thing I wanted to address was using the word Christian. Now, especially in my last video where I said that I don't like even calling myself a Christian a lot of times, or however I worded it. That's also situational dependent. And I'm actually going to look at a comment that I wrote a little bit ago in response to a friend here on YouTube. As to Acts 11:26, so let's look at Acts 11:26, and in the it says, and when he found him, he brought him to Antioch. So for a whole year, Barnabas and Saul met with the church and taught great numbers of people. The disciples were called Christians first at Antioch. So that was where the body of believers first adopted the name of Christian. Now before that, there were Gentiles calling them Christians, and they were more identifying themselves as followers of the way, right? But this is where you need to go to the Greek also, with the word being used there for were called. That is krematizo in Greek, CHREMATIZO, krematizo. And when you look at what that means, um, in its usage here, the definition of this would be to take a name based on what you do and what is important to you, usually work related. It would be like a fisher being called a fisherman, or a carpenter being someone who makes stuff out of wood, or a blacksmith. I think I've made the point there. And its more proper usage and definition, it would be to admonish or to lecture based on a valid standard, as in what is truth and or what is the true standard. So in both of these definitions, the proper and more usage oriented, I can see the validity of taking the name Christian. And I'll say not just the validity, but that, yes, Christian fits, right? But this also brings me to translation of a word based on how people interpret the definition of said word. And I say, give the devil his due. He has corrupted the name Christian for many. The real definition and translation of said word is not understood by many. Among fellow believers, I have no issue using the word or label of Christian. It is outside this realm, situational dependent, that I may try to share what I believe without certain labels due to my audience having a different translation of what certain words actually mean. And to expand on that just a little bit, I think I briefly mentioned it in that video, is you cannot judge a belief system on the abuses of that belief system. You can't judge accurately Christianity by looking at what was done in the name of Christianity, but doesn't actually fit with Christianity's standards whatsoever. Like a lot of the Roman Empire, the Crusades. I mean, there's I'm just using some really big ones, right? But there are abuses down to this very day, and you can't then judge that belief system on false uses of the belief system and the abuses of a belief system. That's not, that's just setting up like straw man type arguments, right? So I don't have an issue with calling myself a Christian, but I have a tendency, because of the different types of people I talk to, different belief systems I come in contact with, I often will get too wrapped around the axle about and be too exacting about the words I use. And it was a good reminder from another comment that, hey, like don't spin your wheels too much on this, and that's a valid point, right? So I just wanted to give those clarifications, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other stuff I could clarify. Hopefully I got the point across of what I'm saying and where my brain was at with some of those comments, but also wanting to make sure I'm not giving the wrong impression, and I don't want to be improperly translating to you what I'm thinking, right? So anyway, this will. Y'all have a good one.